A Child is Born, A Beginner's Guide to Nativity Stories by Amy Jill Levine. This is Chapter 2, The Conception and Birth of Samson, pages 31 through 40. The Conception and Birth of Samson. Accounts of the conception and birth of Moses are replete, with sacrifice and risk, of reproducing during enslavement, of a people's survival, of the courage to disregard immoral political policies, of the importance of teamwork, of the role of women. The conception and births of Ishmael and Isaac are stories of hope and pathos. Sarah's desire to provide a child for Abraham, Hagar's desire for her honor and her freedom. They are also stories of master and enslaved, abuse and protest, comedy and miracle. We now turn to the accounts of the conception and birth of Samson, which are stories of humor. For those who think of the Bible as a sober and somber text, Judges 13 is a laugh-out-loud story in which the divine enters the human realm to bring joy both to the people encountered in the text and to those of us who read it 2 millennia after it was written. The setting: the Book of Judges. Overall, Judges is not a happy story. It should have been. In the previous book of Joshua, Israel enters the promised land under the careful hand of Moses' successor Joshua, yes, the son of Nun, Exodus 33 verse 11, and another 39 times, which can cause confusion. The dad's name is Nun. Not only have the walls of Jericho come tumbling down, that they were not standing at the time calls into question the historicity of the entire conquest narrative, but also the book ends on a relatively high note. Joshua, the servant or slave of the Lord, dies at the age of 110, and the people bury him. Joshua 24, verses 29 and 30. The next verse states, Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua and had known all the works that the Lord did for Israel. Following the numerous complaints of the wilderness generation and that unfortunate incident with the golden calf, everything looks good in Canaan. Joshua 24 verse 33 notes that the Israelites buried the bones of Joseph, which they had carried up from Egypt in Shechem. The book's last line is the notice that Eleazar, son of Aaron, and the high priest, the brother of Moses, died, and they buried him at Gibeah, the town of his son Phinehas, which had been given to him in the hill country of Ephraim. All seems well in Israel. Except these references to death and burial prove ominous. Joseph, Joshua, Eleazar, all dead. References to the hill country of Ephraim and to Gibeah return at the end of Judges in the disturbing story of the death of the Levites, concubine, and the ensuing civil war. The new generation experienced neither slavery in Egypt nor the stress and refining of the wilderness. As the Exodus story begins, now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. Exodus chapter 1, verse 8. So this new generation of the period of the Judges does not remember its past. Judges is a book that spirals downward. While the book of Joshua highlights Israel's military skill, likely a later reflection created by the exilic community in Babylon who wanted to project images of past glory to help them deal with present displacement, the archaeological evidence does not support a conquest narrative. The book of Judges highlights the people's infidelity. Just as the earlier narratives produce various conventions or type scenes of infertile wives, annunciations, endangered children, active women, etc., so Judges is one giant type scene marked by variations on the basic story. Israel sins, God delivers them into the hands of their enemies, a judge arises to defeat the enemies, the people live in peace. Repeat. The first several judges, each with distinct personalities and talents, bring about temporary peace. Among them are Ehud, the left-handed trickster, Deborah, the military leader, Gideon, he of the Hotel Bibles, and Jephthah, the tragic hero. Judges 13 through 16, Samson saga, comes near the end of the book of Judges. Samson is the last judge, after which the chaos ensues. By the end of the book, there are no more judges and there is no more peace. Rather than facing destruction by external military power, the people almost destroy themselves. The refrain, "In those days there was no king in Israel, all the people did what was right in their own eyes," Judges 17, verse 6, repeated with variants in 18:1, 19:1, 21:25, sets up 1 Samuel, which justifies the anointing first of Saul and then of David. Given all this, that Judges 13 can find humor shows resilience of spirit. It also shows how humor can help respond to tragedy. If we forget how to laugh, we may well forget how to live. Judges 13:1 begins conventionally. The Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hands of the Philistines 40 years. We have gone from the God who sees the oppressed Hagar to the God who sees the evil that the Israelites do. Hagar's suffering is redressed. This evil must be addressed. Of the book's downhill motion, this opening provides the farthest slide, since 40 years is the longest any of the tribes in the book had been subjugated. 40 years signals a generation. The impression is that this time, after rounds and rounds of sin, God has had it with these people, and yet the covenant with Abraham, and so with his posterity, endures. There is also surprise in this opening, a break in the expected pattern. The author gives no indication that the people have repented. For example, according to Judges 10:10, the Israelites cried to the Lord, saying, "We have sinned against you, because we have abandoned our God and have served the Baals." These Baals are manifestations of a Canaanite god, whom the Philistines also worshipped, and to whom temples were built in various locations. His name is familiar today from the parody in 2 Kings chapter 1, verses 2 through 3, which calls them Baal-zebub, Lord Baal of the flies. Hebrew Zawai, an excellent example of onomatopoeia. The god's actual name was probably Baal-zebel, Lord of the Prince. The origins of the Philistines are not entirely clear, but archaeological and linguistic evidence, especially from Egypt, suggest they originated from Greek areas around the Aegean and the eastern Mediterranean. They settled on the Canaanite seacoast in the 12th century BCE. Their cities, including Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, and Gaza, remain on maps today. The Bible describes military encounters between the Philistines and both King Saul and King David. The famous Goliath, whom David kills with a slingshot, is a Philistine. For our purposes, the Philistines are the bad guys. The Philistines' own story is lost to history. The Danites in Zorah. Judges 13:2 begins Samson's story. There was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. His wife was barren, having borne no children. This opening doesn't sound promising if we listen with ancient Near Eastern ears, or at least with ears attuned to what else the Bible tells us about geographical markers. Zorah shows up again in Judges 18. The chapter starts with what will become a refrain in the book's last 3 chapters. In those days there was no king in Israel. Judges 18:1a. The refrain, which sounded back in Judges 17:6, after Samson's death, is typically followed by the line, "All the people did what was right in their own eyes." The refrain appears again in 19 verse 1 and 21 verse 25. It suggests that without a king, including a centralized government, funding gained by taxation, and a military chaos will reign. It is up to us to determine the truth of this statement. Would we prefer empire or chaos? What is it that prevents people from doing what is right in their own eyes and prods us to do what our neighbors think is right? The refrain also has implications for Samson, since the Philistines will gouge out his eyes in Judges 16, verse 21. When he topples the temple in which the Philistines have bound him and kills numerous Philistines as well as himself in the process, he prays, "Lord God, remember me and strengthen me only this once, O God, so that with this one act of revenge I may pay back the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Judges 16, verse 28. Whether this action, right in his eyes, would be right in the eyes of the reader, what if there were 10 righteous people in the Philistine temple, is another question. Judges 18 verse 1b reads, "In those days the tribe of Danites was seeking for itself a territory to live in, for until then no territory among the tribes of Israel had been allotted to them." No explanation for this lack of allotment occurs. Despite Samson's success in breaking the power of the Philistines, the other tribes have not made common cause with Samson's tribe. Judges 18 verse 2 notes that the Danites sent 5 valiant men from the whole number of their clan, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to explore it. The previous valiant men of Zorah of the tribe of Dan was Samson. But instead of the end of his judging bringing peace, it brings apostasy. Finding new land, the Danites set up the idol they had obtained in their journey for themselves. Jonathan, son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the time the land went into captivity. Judges 18 verse 30. The captivity refers to the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BCE, a captivity that gave rise to the legend of the 10 lost tribes. More problematic is the notice of their priests. Moses, yes, that Moses, had a son whom he named Gershom. Exodus chapter 2, verse 22. As a reminder, the name, which refers to Moses' sojourn in Midian, comes from the Hebrew Ger, not native born, part of Haggai's name as well, and Sham, meaning there. Moses explains the name, famously in the King James Version, as "I have been a stranger in a strange land." Things have gotten so bad that Moses' grandson and his children promote idolatry. No lineage is safe. Not all children follow in their parents' footsteps. Other readings of this verse suggest that the priest's father was a fellow named Manasseh. Most likely this change was made to preserve Moses' reputation. Spin control is not a new invention. Here are 3 other points concerning Samson's tribe, the tribe of Dan. First, in the Song of Deborah, likely one of the Bible's earliest passages, Deborah, the judge, talks about the tribes who joined her in battle, and those who did not. In Judges 5:17, she asks, "And Dan, why did he abide with the ships?" The verse suggests that the Danites may have been originally seafaring people, like the Philistines, and not initially connected to the group that made the exodus from Egypt. Some scholars find their origins with a group known as the Danyen, or the Dan-Una. Greeks, perhaps mercenaries on the Egyptian payroll, who were to keep the peace in the parts of Israel under Egyptian control in the 12th and 11th centuries BCE. Since we're veering here away from biblical studies and into In Search of Ancient Mysteries, I'll end this section with the note that the ancestry is itself fluid. People conquer other peoples. Populations migrate from place to place, and the various genetic genealogy services show that many of us are comprised of multiple ethnic groups. Second, the author of the book of Revelation, John, claims that he heard the number of those who were sealed for protection, 144,000, sealed out of every tribe of the people of Israel. Revelation chapter 7, verse 4. The list of the 12 tribes that follows omits the tribe of Dan. Consequently, Christian writers such as Irenaeus, writing in Lyon in the early 2nd century, claimed that the Antichrist will descend from the tribe of Dan. I do wonder, how today would one know? On a third, less ominous note, from the Middle Ages on, claims were made that the Danes, the people of Denmark, ascended from the Danites. Conversely, the Beta Israel, a group of Ethiopian Jews, also claims to be descended from the Danites. I'm a biblical scholar, not a geneticist, so I'll stop here with what we can conclude from this brief geographical survey. Membership in the tribe of Dan is potentially problematic. Samson's death does not bring political relief to the Israelites, but it marks the moment when Israel's problems are more internal than external. Instead of being attacked by others, they will attack each other. In retrospect, the time of Samson will seem like the good old days. In the prospectus, the death of Samson and its aftermath set up the need for the monarchy. Dynastic succession rather than charismatic leadership, centralized government rather than occasional tribal unity. Manoah and his wife. Finally, we have our focus, a Danite man named Manoah. His name, which comes from the same root as the name Noah, the fellow from the flood, means rest, in the sense of relax, or cease from work, rather than the rest of the story. Noah starts out well, but in Genesis 9 he winds up getting drunk, which leads to some highly problematic events. Thus, with this intertextual reference, we are already primed. Will this man of Zorah bring rest, or drunken destruction, or both? The Bible does not name Manoah's wife, but it does give physical details. His wife was barren, having borne no children, Judges 13 verse 2. Recollections flood in. We are introduced to Sarah with a line, "Now Sarai was barren. She had no children," Genesis 11 verse 30. The verse can function as a tautology. Tautologies are repetitive expressions like illegal trafficking or convicted felon. Or here, I am not over-exaggerating, since barren seems synonymous with having borne no children. However, the verse may be assigning the infertility to the wife, not to the husband. I've read ahead, and from what I know of Manoah, he would not be my first pick for the father of my child. The same word combination appears in Luke chapter 1, verse 7, which describes Zechariah and Elizabeth, the parents of John the Baptizer, as they had no children because Elizabeth was barren, and both were getting on in years. The notice of infertility also cues the type scene or convention. So already I am expecting a lunch, an angel to make an announcement, and a son. Compared to the previous examples of this convention, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Rachel, we know very little about these parents in Judges 13. The earlier narratives name the women. Here, nothing. The earlier narrative start with details about the families, including, in each case, prayers for children. Here, nothing. Manoah and his wife may be a happily married couple more interested in matters other than children. She may be wary of pregnancy and childbirth given the high mortality rates of childbirth. She may not be thrilled with Manoah. It is sometimes helpful to imagine how we would cast a story. Back to Victoria Mature. Visualizing a text can help with interpretation. For movie buffs, in the 2018 version of the Samson story starring Taylor James, not to be confused with James Taylor as Samson, Manoah is played by Rutger Hauer, Soldier of Orange, Blade Runner, and his wife, named Xylophonis, is played by Lindsay Wagner, the Bionic Woman. Manoah strikes me as miscast, but casting the Bionic Woman as his wife is a stroke of genius.